Hi, Fred. I'm so excited to welcome you to the Rule Breaker Studio. So, I'm super excited for you to introduce yourself. I would like to share a little bit about how we met, if that's okay.
Oh,
So,
please.
I love a good network story. And Fred and I met through a mutual connection who was like, oh, hey, I think you guys might have some synergy. So, I just wanted to put that out there because I love a good network story. And we got connected via email and really have had the best time becoming friends. So I'm super excited to hear what you're going to share with us today about your nursing views. So with that, I'll let you get started. You can introduce yourself and then let's jump into the conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much. Alyssa and Crystal, first off, obviously, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited about just spending the time together. And I think, Alyssa, the first thing I'll say, and maybe we'll come back to it later, is around that networking piece. Like this is not by happenstance. There's all purpose and we're deliberate about it. And if I had to rewind the tape in my career, it's really about how can I start earlier networking and reaching out and creating relationships so that we can collaborate together. And I missed that earlier in my career. So I appreciate the shout out so early. And hopefully a couple of your viewers will take that back and go, oh, I should start that now if I haven't done it already. So, all right. So I'm Fred Neis. I'm a nurse by background. I've got about 30 years experience. My journey is probably a combination of both traditional and non-traditional kind of trajectory. Early on, I started as a paramedic and a firefighter, worked my way through nursing school, graduated, and had kind of known. And I was in a family where my father was the chief financial officer and very business oriented. And so I probably got enough influence out of that I decided I didn't want to just be into the clinical space. I wanted some business experience as well. And so as I transitioned from my BSN program, I went pretty rapidly into getting my graduate degree in nursing administration. While I did, probably the usual suspects of emergency services, ICU, flight team. And then when I graduated there, started working in a couple of different health systems as a clinical manager and eventually as a director of a very large, busy trauma center on the East Coast. It was all great. It was all fun. I learned a ton. There are things that I think we might get into here later around leadership development, particularly that I think now are very near and dear to my heart, and even 20 years later are still being done today. And I would say we need to undo them. I know, Crystal, you and I've talked a little bit about this as well, off camera, and I know that we're going to get into some really exciting conversation about it. I got to a point though where it was kind of accidental that I got to dream a little bit, and I called a friend of mine who worked at the advisory board company at the time. They had been consultants at the health system where I was last at, and I was always impressed by the work that they did and the people that I encountered. And I called this woman and I said, I really don't know what you all do. I'm just curious if there's a spot for a guy like me. I'd really love the opportunity to join the team. And a couple of weeks later, I ended up joining the team, and I spent 11 and a half years at the advisory board company, which was probably one of the most influential sets of experiences in my life, both personally and professionally. And to this day, I really think I count a lot of those relationships still among friends today. I also got exposure to really the entire suite of the healthcare delivery system itself. An advisory board was built on kind of best practices. And then we built a technology vertical as well, and business intelligence tools, clinically, operationally, and financially. And after I exited there, I ended up going to Lumeris. And at Lumeris, I worked with, it's a Medicare Advantage plan and a value-based care enablement company, as well as it's got underpinned by some really cool technology. And I spent 5.5 years there and got some experience not only on the payer side. As a nurse, I ended up as the operational executive for marketing and sales, which completely out of the wheelhouse of what nurses may end up doing. And then a year and a half ago, I got a phone call, and I'm where I am today. Been there for 17 months, and a lot of what I focus on today in my career is this. I think the exciting stuff we'll get to here in a few minutes around leadership development, workforce strategy, operational agility, career development, and I think that's one of the areas maybe we could go into during our time here today around the opportunity for nurses to dream a little more broadly than they do, I would say we do today, around the opportunities and possibility for career growth and career trajectory. And so I've been doing a lot of that work over the last 17, 18 months, and even really before that. And then on the side, I'm a dad. I got a 6-year-old. And if you ask my 6-year-old what I do for a living, it's not what we're doing today, which is sitting in front of screens in our offices. He would tell you I'm a fireman, which is true. I work part-time. I still work part-time as a paramedic firefighter for one of the area departments here in the Kansas City metro area. And as well, I still get the opportunity to do some peer review, conference speaking, and I'm working with a publisher on some clinical work as well. So clinical education modules. So that's a little bit about me. I'm really excited again to be here. Let's dive in wherever you want to go, and I'll try to keep up.
Okay, so first, I love networking, and I know Crystal does too. So I want to start with, so you had this person in your network who helped you lead to another opportunity. So I'd love to explore, like, what is that? What is networking? What has it meant to you? Kind of what do you mean by you wish you had started earlier in your career?
Yeah, I mean, there are probably only a few attributes, elements, or features of my career where I would say if I got to rewind the tape, I would do it differently. And networking and developing relationships and developing a healthy network and nurturing it along was probably one of the top 2 or 3 things that I would say I would do differently. And I would say that it would start at being a student. So as a student nurse, I would strongly encourage student nurses who probably are saying to themselves, oh, I kind of know my direction. I'm going to become a clinical nurse. I'm going to work in peds or ICU or step down or ICU or emergency services. They kind of already have decided where they're headed. I would say go though and explore and create that network early on of your opportunities within that space that you're interested in. So reach out to the nurse managers of those departments in those health systems in the area in which you're interested in. And conversely, and this goes to the leadership development piece, I think it's incumbent upon nurse leaders, nurse managers, directors, executives to have a relatively open door policy to encourage individuals to reach out to them and ask, because their students are constantly curious. Early careerists are constantly curious about, what's out there and where can I dream and what could I do, or even eventually develop enough maybe of a portfolio or a profile brand that people think of them and say, Alyssa, you are now going to be my first phone call when I need to, clear IRB. That's how this all works. And I want folks to get excited about it. It's uncomfortable early on, right? To reach out, you had no reason to say yes. And I'm not suggesting that nurse managers be reckless with their calendars and just accept every invitation. They might need to be deliberate or somewhat purposeful about it. I just think that, it's really important early on to do that. I honestly stumbled onto it. And that phone call that I made that got me to the advisory board was remarkable. And, I am forever indebted to her for picking up that phone call and taking enough, kind of risk in me, because we only knew each other relatively professionally, to at least open the door for me to get into the advisory board.
That's where I was exactly going to go next.
Oh, okay.
The network is the superpower. Hands down, best asset that I have is the network. But next, I was going to talk about that phone call to the advisory board, because everyone I know that has done what seem like very courageous moves is just crazy enough to ask the question. Mm-hmm. And I find that 90% of the time, people answer and say, yeah, I'm happy to help you. Many people I know, they've looked to these big organizations that they worked for. And I, like you, advisory board is one of those for me. And never thought I would be doing that. But now I've been in the spaces of learning physician leadership aspect, or globally speaking to people that do not speak our same language.
Mm-hmm.
The growth has been phenomenal, all just because you're willing to ask the question and say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those people that it's not natural, right? I'm very extroverted. I am fine to go out and I don't know a stranger. But what about those people that don't do that or are afraid to, that rejection? It's real. It happens. You know how many times I've reached out to Brene Brown and Bob Goff?
Oh.
And I know one day they're going to answer. People have actually picked up the phone and said, yeah, I'm happy to help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe Brene Brown is going to hear this podcast and
I
hear
hope
that you're.
so.
Please reach out, Brene. If you hear this, please, Crystal would love to reach out and make that connection. And so, Crystal, yeah,
Brene Brown. I just want to tag in. So I have a personal story about networking, not being afraid to like reach out and ask someone for something. So I'm so glad that you shared that, Fred, because I'll tell you, actually, after you and I spoke the first time, my daughter, so she's a big dreamer, right? And I love that about her. She's a big dreamer. She wanted to meet this lady from one of the Disney Animal Kingdom documentaries. So she was like, Mom, this is my birthday wish. This is my birthday wish. And I was like, I don't think I can make this happen. I never said that out loud, but I was just like, in my head, I was like, there's no way that I can get this lady to meet my kid, Well, I found her on LinkedIn and I sent her a message. And like 2 weeks went by, never messaged me back. So I was just like, oh, it's kind of dead in the water, And then randomly, like one Wednesday, she messaged me back and she was like, hey, I don't know if I can do like a, like I had mentioned like a video chat or something like that. She's like, I don't know if I can do that. She was like, but do you ever come to Disney World? And I'm like, yeah, we have season passes. So I messaged her back and I was like, of course we come to Disney World. We have season passes. And she was like, well, I can meet her on this date. Let me get it approved. And I was like, okay, no way. This is getting approved. Da, da, da. I never said anything. Well, December 6th, this woman who did not know me from Adam met my then 6-year-old turning 7 at Disney World, gave her a backstage tour of the aquarium, let her watch all the divers go in, let her ask her 200 questions. And it was the best experience. My kid got her autograph and her character book and everything. It was so fun. But I mean, it's literally the power of like the worst thing that's going to happen is someone's going to say no. So, just having that little, start of courage to like introduce yourself and ask the questions can really just, be transformational. So, and then she invited my daughter back. She was like, if you still, are loving this whole world and you want to come back in a couple of years, message me. So she gave me her cell phone number and I was like, look here, my kid met this lady off of, that she idolizes on TV. So it was really cool.
I love it. Well, yeah, come back in a couple of years because your daughter will have 200 more questions.
200 more questions.
Write them all down, though. That's right. Yeah, no can suck or no can be a motivator, right? And Crystal, you were just saying too, like you're an extrovert. I'm not. And outwardly, I think people are surprised when I say that I actually am an introvert. I'm very much an introvert in looking at my profile. However, I've had to force myself to get very uncomfortable because in order to continue to grow and be curious and learn, I have to get out there a little bit. And Crystal, I think it was you too, who just said something about the power of saying yes. So yes, it's powerful for the leader to say yes. I'd be happy to take 30 minutes and get to meet you. It's also the yes piece as we kind of grow in our careers and people reach out and say, hey, do you think you could do this or what? Say yes. Should be at least through, I would say maybe mid-career, there should be very few reasons to say no to something. So if opportunities are given to you, say yes. Even if they scare the living daylights out of you, say yes. Part of that is then realizing where your limitations might be and going and finding help and reaching out to, the Alyssas and Crystals of the world and saying, I've not done this before. I've gotten asked to do it. Could you help me out? Give me some, guidelines and kind of thought. And that's the power of the networks and the relationships. So yeah, totally dig it. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And most times people will say yes. It's just like this podcast. Alyssa said, will you do this? Sure. I have no idea what I'm doing about making a podcast, but look how many amazing people we have connected with. So if I want to shift us to leadership development, which is just my passion, so I can't help but go that direction. And you said you were raised in a home with a CFO, so very business brained. Now I'm curious, did your graduate degree, is that in, you said nursing administration?
It's in nursing administration. Yeah.
That's the route I went. But in hindsight, and then my DMP is in nurse executive practice.
Mm-hmm.
I had kind of wished that I had gotten the MBA because I missed those business pieces. And so when you're thinking about your own path and your work in leadership development, what do you think in hindsight?
Well, I think it'll be for others to judge whether or not I've had a successful career even to date, right? Like at the end of the day, I can't judge those things. I would say if I reflect a little bit on one versus the other, first off, for those out there who are listening, I failed and had to drop out of accounting. I had to take it over again, just so we're really clear. It just didn't resonate with me. I had been a clinician for so long and I really understood the clinical side. And so my very first accounting class, I failed miserably the first few weeks and had to drop out. And
did your dad say, what in the world, Fred?
Exactly. You're not my son. Yeah, that's right. I would say, and not knowing your program specifically, I feel like I got a lot of good business classes and experience, and then I got to translate it into an internship for I think it was 6 or 7 week internship, and it was very valuable. I think to your point, where rewinding the tape, an MBA would have been helpful for me in my career, would have given me broader exposure to industry generally. And I think one of the things that we still don't do a great job of in healthcare is take from other industries and learn from other industries the practices that they have. I said this recently in another venue. We're in a zero defect environment. I get that. We're in healthcare. We can't make even a singular mistake because it has, even if it doesn't have devastating consequences, it has consequences that ripple out. And so there are practices and industry kind of knowledge and know-how in other industries that we should do a better job of translating into the business of delivering healthcare. And so, yes, I think that MBA probably would have been helpful we should do this differently. I think the other thing around leadership and kind of the business side is, I think we wait way too long to teach clinicians, nurses, doctors, therapists, in the therapies. We wait way too long to teach them the business and us the business of healthcare. It would have been tremendously helpful to have learned how my paycheck got generated when I was coming out of nursing school, right?
Okay, so I have a question. So I know in your current role and in your previous roles, you've had a lot of exposure to various different leaders, different levels. And I would love to hear from you what you think are maybe the top 3 things when you're thinking of leadership development that leaders should always be thinking about, or currently that you feel like are the trends for leadership development. So Fred's list of top 3 things.
I grabbed a pen just in case I need that. Even it might be my whoopee. I might just hold it just to comfort me that I'm going to come up with the 3 and put them in no particular order. I'll at least caveat it that way.
Okay.
I think in leadership development, at a top line, one is around developing culture. And in culture, I run that in a couple of lanes. 1, the interpersonal relationships between colleagues. 2, the relationships we need to develop with our consumers. And I'm specifically using the word consumer rather than patient. I think I'd like to remove patient from my lexicon as much as possible, if not altogether. I think we're in a business of service and obviously product delivery, outcome delivery as well. I think we've got to develop better culture, better service, and a better orientation to who our customers are and how we serve them in a purposeful, meaningful way. I think in kind of varying degrees of my answer. And number two is based on kind of where someone might be in their career trajectory, from frontline all the way up to a nurse executive. And I generically use the word nurse executive, not CNO, because we have so many places we can be a nurse executive today. Chief operating officer, chief executive officer, founder, right? Co-founder, CEO. So there are a lot of them. So nurse executive. So my next answer to that is, I think it's about business. I think just a general business background would be tremendously helpful early in the career, especially even later. And that involves also, in the DNA, the curiosity, the innate curiosity that we all need to have, and be continual learners. And then three, and maybe this is still confined within the cultural space. It's both cultural as well as just tactical. I think how to be a leader is really important, and how do you want to lead is important. I say, those who set the tempo win the game. And by that, I mean, as a nurse manager, I remember, on a Friday, I was the charge nurse. On a Monday, I was the clinical nurse manager. Saturday and Sunday were not orientation. And we all kind of held our collective breath of like, is Fred going to be okay to be a clinical manager? Again, others can decide whether or not I was successful or not. I think it's really important, though, to spend the time nurturing and developing those, especially the young leaders. And I see it as well in executive leadership today, in how to manage and lead in a way that sets the tempo to create that winning team and the desire to go towards that mission. And I think it's really, really important. So words matter immensely. The techniques in which we use to engage people matter immensely. And the techniques that we just generally employ, even in calendar management, matter immensely. And I think, we should spend some more time really kind of developing and cultivating leaders to do that.
Yeah, you nailed it. That last number three, not to negate number one and number two, they're both highly critical, but that last piece that you said, I just, at my core, believe that frontline leader is the one that is driving. I mean, they're right in the middle. And I love the sports analogies. And so that's what you said. There's a mission. We're all like trying to get this winning team there. And you're just not equipped. You're right. Here's Friday, you're doing this. Monday, you're running a multi-million-dollar business, truly with no business at all, or understanding how to motivate, inspire. Just, it's about the people.
Yeah. Let me flip the script. What would be your top three, both of you?
Oh my gosh. Well,
I mean,
you didn't see it going this way.
I can tell my number one, I think when it comes to leadership development is learning how to communicate with people. And then my number two is probably being comfortable asking for help. I think, when I think back about my own leadership pathway, and really I still consider myself fairly early careerist. And I've struggled, sometimes knowing like when to say no and when to ask for help, and recognizing like those things, which I think do come with experience to some degree. So communication, knowing when to ask for help. And then I also think, resources. So how to develop yourself, recognizing, recognizing what you do well, what you don't do well, and how you can operate in what you do well more than what you don't do well. I had a leader one time that really tended to like want to, really wanted to kind of whoop the weakness out of you, so like whatever but didn't really play to your strengths. And so I've always strived to kind of be on the opposite end of that, and making sure like I understand what are the strengths of the team and how do you work within those, versus trying to get everyone's weaknesses resolved and everybody on the same level playing field. I don't know if that makes sense, but nonetheless, I think those are mine.
I just have to point out that's a new Southernism for me, and I'm born and raised in Tennessee, so I know a lot of them. But whoop the weakness out of you.
I'm from the South, born and raised.
Cut that out of this.
I mean, you can tell my grandma might have got a switch on me a couple of times.
Oh, that's so good. I'm going to stick with what you talked about with investing in those frontline leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we had to pick one place to start and invest,
Mm-hmm.
that is the core. All levels matter, but that
Mm-hmm.
group in particular. Now, if I've done, as I'm sure you have, lots of leadership assessments, no matter whose it is, what the competency is. The top two that always rise up are the ability to navigate a difficult conversation
Mm-hmm.
and finance. Those always come up,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
it comes back to the core of, how do you care for people? How do you build that winning team? And it's just what you said, it's the vision. So I always go back to that sports analogy. If I had, 30 minutes to share with somebody, I would say, okay, you're trying to build a team that's going to win the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
You're the coach now. You can't be the quarterback anymore, even if you were the best. You can't build a team of all quarterbacks. So like Alyssa's saying, you got to work to each other's strengths and appreciate. So we can't all look alike, think alike, be alike. It's how do you build this core? That's where I would spend my energy first, but it always comes back to people. Like, love people without an agenda. How do you help grow them into the very best version of themselves and place them where they're going to be successful?
Yeah, and make them position players. Like, to your point, there's one coach, there's one quarterback, there are a couple linemen, there are a couple of wide receivers, there's a center. So how do you find the talent to occupy each one of those positions, and then operate without a lot of variation, right?
Right.
There's no substitute for good clinical judgment. However, before we have to execute with good clinical judgment, how do we keep things kind of within a set of variables where we don't have a lot of opportunity for deviation? Kind of going back to rewinding the tape, if someone had told me putting in a Foley 20 years ago, I probably shouldn't open up 3 different Foley catheters because of the cost alone, and those are the types of things that kind of variation and that kind of waste we can't have in a process to have a winning team. And your point around people, healthcare it's going to be a people business, at least for the foreseeable future, even with the infusion of, we talk a lot about AI or just technology in general. It's still going to be a human touch business and require humans. So how do we maximize the humans that we have, put them on the field where we need them, bring in the technologies where they're available to us, or we want to be innovators and give it a shot, and then execute against that playbook. And the plan is win a Super Bowl.
Yeah. And it's so wild to me that people will ask, how you're doing, or you see someone's not doing a great job and we just accept it. And we're like, oh, you're doing fine. If the quarterback's not doing great, it doesn't matter if they're the greatest of all time. You were trying to win this game. You're going to pull them and put the person that is in the right spot. And so we're afraid to move people around or give them that feedback, or just aren't equipped to know how to do that. Right. And so that's where I would invest, is because I believe everybody possesses gifts within them, and we just have to know how to draw them out and elevate them, and we could do better.
Yeah.
Well, and depending on what their strengths are, maybe the nurse manager role isn't the role for them, but maybe the clinical educator role, or, there's other opportunities that they might actually thrive in. For the sake of the whole team, if you have, take the opportunity to identify what those look like. Okay, Fred, you're on the rule breakers. So we have to know, if you're breaking any rule in healthcare, what's the rule you're breaking?
I put some thought into this. Yeah, full disclosure to your audience, you at least gave me a heads up that this was going to be the question. And I can't remember exactly what I said the first time. I remember I blurted out an answer when we were a couple of weeks ago when we were talking, and I can't remember what it is. And I remember I've spent some time really thinking about it. And I think the answer is culture. I think if we're going to break something, and build it. And truly, I think from the ground up, I think it's culture, because I think the people are there. We need the culture then that's then designed to identify what the strategy is and then chase after that strategy in a well executed way. Crystal, to your point, we want to build each other up. We want to put the position players where they belong. We're going to run the play as designed. Periodically you get to be Patrick Mahomes and decide I don't have to throw it all the way as the play was designed. It turns out Travis Kelce's standing 10 yards ahead of me. I'll just toss it to him with my sidearm and half blind. That's the clinical judgment piece. That's what we pay people.
Half blind or the refs?
Too soon. Too soon.
Couldn't help it.
Season's barely over. Yeah, that's right. I think it's really culture. And I think we also can no longer tolerate some of the things that we've allowed year over year, and that we still perennially talk about with, man, can you believe that's the culture here, that we allow so-and-so to speak to someone like that?
Yeah.
We can't do that anymore. We can't have words truly not just have meaning and impact, they can really be harmful to people depending on how things are communicated. And so I think of a story of, and it may have happened to the two of you as well. I know it happened to me years ago when I was still working clinically. And, as we'd walk in or out of a shift, invariably one of the other team members would be like, man, don't go in there. Just don't go in there. Which we all kind of intuitively know what that means. Like, wow, it was really busy. You're going to make it though. Don't come in here, kind of jokingly. Can you imagine though, if you're walking through a waiting room and people hear that? They're like, whoa, like the nurses, the most trusted profession in the United States, just said, don't go in there. Like, maybe we should leave, right? And that's a simple example. Yeah. Yet the same kind of relationships between nurses, and physicians and clinicians in general and team members. We've got to do a better job of leveling up culture.
Yeah, I love that answer. I collectively, people have really great answers, but we've normalized so many things that are not normal that we tolerate. And I teach a charge nurse course quite frequently, and that is, you set the tone. And what does it feel like? You can walk in the same situation. What does it feel like when you walk in and somebody says, oh, this has been the worst day ever, versus, hey, we're happy to see you. Here's what we've done to prepare you for success. It changes the whole game. And along those same lines, leader to leader, we see somebody leaving at 2:00. We don't know that they got there at 4 a.m. to see the night shift. And we're like, what do you do, working banker's hours? Instead of high five, I'm proud of you for having a little bit of boundaries and putting some of the things that matter first. So I like that answer a lot.
Thanks.
I had a cardiologist. I had picked up PRN in the cath lab to learn new clinical skills. And I had a cardiologist who was basically, prepping me for the day that I would be on call, and I would be like the only nurse there. And he was like, if you're the leader in the room and your heart rate's up, everybody else's heart rate's going to be up. So if you create stress and they see that from you, then everybody's going to be stressed. But if you're in control, then everybody's going to be in control and you're going to have success for your team. So I always, that's lived with me since I was 23, rolling out of the, 3 a.m. cath lab call. I'm like, okay, if I go in and this is a real STEMI and we're working, I'm going to be calm. My heart rate's going to be 50 and their heart rate is going to, they're going to make it off the table. So I always like to share that, since you guys were talking about, just how you kind of command and move that along. Okay, Fred. So I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation on the Rule Breakers today. And I'm sure other people would maybe like to connect with you in the future, carry some of these conversations. And then I know you do some other leadership development work and consulting. So I'd love for you to maybe share where's the best place for people to get in contact with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate very much this time. This was so much fun. It was fun to get to know both of you a little bit more professionally. I expect that we'll have opportunity to do it more personally coming up here in the very near future. There are multiple ways to get a hold of me. LinkedIn is obviously a good one, and I know the link will be put into this podcast, as well as my email, one of my email addresses. will also be put in the podcast. My door is truly open, and I mean this, for anyone to reach out and ask questions and be curious. And, if they've got questions around, hey, I just want to bounce ideas around my career off of you, happy to do that as well. And I've really just enjoyed it. So thanks so much for inviting me, and maybe we'll get to do this again. I don't know if you have repeat guests or not. If you do, count me in if you're up for it.
I'll put you on the list.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fred.